All right, so on to a little bit more of the meat. So great. You've watched Danielle's talk. You've created awesome content. You've gotten fans that are creating awesome content, but what do you do with it? There's a lot of places content can live, and most people take and just shove it into their existing website. In some cases, this can be great, but you're losing a lot of leverage here. So the really first thing here is around timing. So how many of you have heard this from marketing? Like if you've worked with a big marketing department, every launch has to be a tier 1 launch. And if it's a tier 2 or 3, they're, okay, well, what can we add in there? What can we ship new to make this a tier 1 launch? The other piece that as soon as we decided, no matter what it is, it's a tier 1 launch, is okay, when do we launch this? And it's always Tuesday through Thursday. Tuesday is the biggest day for traffic. If we can get on Hacker News, #1 spot on Tuesday, we'll have this many page views. We're gonna have this many signups, and that's great. And that is pretty much every marketing department, to overgeneralize, but pretty much every marketing department I've ever worked with. Now, in reality, shipping things, launching things can be broken up a lot more. So expanding on launching, I still actually hate Monday. Monday is not a good day for launching, just because your engineers are going to be worried about it through the weekend. You're going to be thinking about it. You're not going to sleep well. It's just going to create other problems that are unrelated to audience. Friday, I actually love. Friday, the way I approach this is if I can't get on Hacker News on Tuesday, but I can get it on Hacker News on Friday, that's great for reach. If Twitter volume is busier on Tuesday but quieter on Friday, if I can launch a tier 2, a tier 3, a smaller product update, I can get eyeballs that I wouldn't otherwise get because other people are competing for those. So this is a really kind of nice opportunity. The other one is weekends. I actually love launching things on weekends, not because I want to be working on the weekends, but because I can make an announcement, tweet about it, post it to Hacker News. I've done this before where I've done this, gone up to Sonoma, come back to a lot of responses and engagement. Now this depends on how much you want to engage your customers during this time. Do you want to be discussing it in the conversation? And if that's the case, obviously you may not want this. But for smaller kind of interesting engineering blog posts, thought leadership, that kind of stuff, it's really easy to do. And weekends are quiet, but there's still developers reading and engaging with your content on the weekends. You can produce all this content too ahead of launching your product. So some of this thought leadership stuff you can be building up a stream of. So don't necessarily wait on this. So a little more tactically on the third-party channel piece. I view this two ways. There's beginner guides and then advanced content. And I've seen a couple different approaches, really different approaches for each of these, and you should be doing both. So on the beginner content piece, really what you want to do is have your content live on a third-party property. There's one exception to this, I'll say, is if you're a e-learning site of some kind, like Code Academy or something else, well, you want all this learning content to live on your site. Heroku's really interesting from the early days. I think we had this charter of we wanted to be the place you would come how to learn to come to build apps. And that was great. And that was altruistic, and that was big. If you were building a web app and wanting to build it the right way, we wanted to be the place to teach you how to do that. Today, I would argue that's not as much as what you find on our Dev Center, our documentation, our guides, because it's simply hard. You focus on product documentation over time. As your product grows and becomes more complex, you're going to want to focus on that. And then how do you get other people engaging, contributing? There are some counterexamples to where this can work, but for the most part, over time, I see as your product grows, you're going to move away from saying, all right, let's teach everyone about REST APIs, because it's a hard uphill battle. But this doesn't mean you can't have an influence on it and your name can't be tied to it. Sponsoring a third-party site, creating a third-party site that's not under your brand. Heroku actually has a great example of this in 12factor.net, where it's clearly tied to Heroku if you know anything about it, but it's not a Heroku.com property. There's a lot of these. So, and I'll talk a bit about kind of how does this actually work worthwhile for you in the retargeting bit in a minute. So I did one of these as again, kind of an accident. The Postgres tutorial is 200 pages, and it's archaic, and no one reads it, and it hasn't been updated in 10 years. So I started to say, well, let's go update the docs in Postgres. And then I decided I don't want to touch this horrible documentation thing. So I'm like, let's just create a new one. So I sat down on a plane flight and wrote Postgres guide over a couple days. It's up on GitHub. It's open source, so anyone can contribute. But there's a couple of pieces here. Actually, I'll skip the lasers. So there's a couple of pieces here. Like, it's clearly, you can see the Heroku tie right in there. Call out to Heroku Postgres. There's a tie out to myself. There's advertising on it. Whether you like advertising or not, if you want it, there's a free opportunity to put your advertising directly there. The other thing is there's retargeting on here. So this is a really, really focused audience of people that care about Postgres. This is a perfect audience to target for Heroku Postgres or any other Postgres activities. You could imagine doing this for Rails or Ruby or all these other things as well that are a captive targeted audience that we can pixel and retarget to and do interesting things with. So great. I spent some time. I created some custom documentation. But was this worth the effort? I think that's where it really comes down to. How much is it worth to spend time doing any of these things? So over 2 years, it's seen 150,000 unique viewers, 400,000 impressions. The amount of time I've invested in this was about 16 hours of initial effort, and then occasionally checking some pull requests. Net total, I have not put more than 40 hours in here. And to have a potential reach of 150,000 people that we know are interested in Postgres, that we know we can target our product to me, that seems like a pretty good return. John Sheehan actually talked, I think, about this at a show and tell. They've got a lot of these properties that they retarget to, and their cost per acquisition of users $2 just for retargeting to these sites because it's a very captive audience. So well worth the investment and the cost.